Why does Squidward hate everything? One moment he's the bitter neighbor yelling at SpongeBob, and the next he's playing clarinet with the passion of a virtuoso. And if you think that's just comedy contrast, you're missing something crucial. Because I don't think Squidward is just unhappy, I think he's trapped. And the show has been giving us clues this whole time that nobody really put together. It started for me with an episode I saw completely differently as a kid. The episode is called Squidward Plus One, and it shows us something disturbing about Squidward's true nature. Let me show you what I mean. In this episode, Squidward gets an invitation to an exclusive gala for sophisticated artists. Finally, after years of waiting, he's invited into high society. But there's a catch. He needs a plus one, a companion who's just as cultured as he is. And here's where it gets interesting. Squidward has nobody, not a single friend in all of Bikini Bottom who even remotely meets his standards. But that's not the real shock. The shock comes when he desperately starts convincing himself that he's better off alone. He says things like, "I don't need anyone, and solitude is my choice." But then the episode shows us something brutal. We see Squidward sitting alone in his house, surrounded by his self-portraits, and suddenly he starts talking to them, as if they were real people, as if he's done this 1,000 times before. That's not funny, that's tragic, because this scene shows us Squidward's isolation isn't chosen, it's his prison, and he knows it. At the end of the episode, he does something unexpected. He invites SpongeBob, the one guy he supposedly hates most in the world. Why? Because even SpongeBob's annoying presence is better than the alternative. Complete loneliness with himself. But here's the question that won't let me go. If Squidward is so desperate for company, why does he push everyone away? Why does he sabotage every chance at friendship? Why does he always choose isolation? The answer is disturbing. I don't think Squidward hates people. I think Squidward hates himself, and his bitterness toward everyone else. That's just a shield. Let's talk about Squidward's talent. The guy can make damn good art when he wants to. We've seen him as a brilliant clarinetist in private moments, as a talented painter, as a dancer, as an actor. In the episode Artist Unknown, Squidward is even celebrated as an art teacher because he draws out hidden creativity from someone. But here's the paradox. Why does he always fail publicly then? In Tentacle Vision, Squidward practices for months for a single concert. He gives it everything. And when the moment comes, he fails completely. His performance is painfully bad. But wait, in the same episode, we hear Squidward playing alone at home later, and it sounds beautiful, flawless even. That makes no sense. Unless it's not a talent problem. It's a sabotage problem. I believe Squidward sabotages himself, consciously or unconsciously. Every time he's close to success, he finds a way to ruin it. And I think I know why. In Squilliam Returns, there's a scene many people overlook. Squidward suddenly gets everything he's ever wanted. Fame, recognition, fans. He's celebrated. His art is loved. And you know what happens? He panics. Real existential panic. His reaction isn't joy, it's terror. Because success means responsibility. Success means people have expectations. Success means he can't fail anymore. And for someone like Squidward, who's built his entire self-image on, "The world doesn't understand me," success is the greatest threat. Because if he's successful, he can't blame others anymore. Then he'd have to admit, maybe it was me all along. But it gets even darker. Let's talk about the parallel world episode. In Opposite Day, we see a version of Squidward who actually becomes successful. He's famous, rich, loved. And you know what this version of Squidward does? He's just as unhappy, maybe even more unhappy. This scene is a punch in the face for every viewer because it shows us Squidward's problem isn't his situation. It's not the Krusty Krab. It's not SpongeBob. It's not even Bikini Bottom. The problem is Squidward himself. He carries his hell with him. No matter where he is, no matter what he achieves, the dissatisfaction remains because the true imprisonment is in his head. But here comes the part that really shook me. There's an episode almost nobody has analyzed, Squid on Strike. In this episode, Squidward goes on a historic strike against Mr. Krabs. And for a brief moment, we see something rare. Squidward with a mission, with passion, with purpose. He organizes the strike. He motivates others. He fights for something. And for the first time in a long while, he looks alive. But then, at the climax, when he's about to win, he does something strange. He gives up. Not because he loses, but because he gets scared. Scared of what? Scared of change. Scared that if he wins, his life might actually be different. And change is dangerous because it means he'd have to leave his comfort zone of misery. Squidward has learned to live in his misery. It's familiar to him. It's safe. And paradoxically, success is a greater threat than failure because success would force him to actually be happy, and he doesn't know happiness. Now we're getting to the core of the matter. What made Squidward what he is? There's an episode from the early seasons that most people have forgotten, Squidward the Unfriendly Ghost. In this episode, Squidward completely withdraws from society. He barricades himself in his house, lets nobody in, and lives like a hermit. And you know what? He's happy. For the first time, truly happy. But then something interesting happens. The longer he's alone, the more his reality begins to dissolve. He starts seeing things. He talks to objects. His self-portraits start criticizing him. This episode is brilliant because it shows us Squidward's psyche is unstable. When he's alone too long, he falls apart. But when he's with others, he becomes bitter and aggressive. He's trapped between two hells, the hell of loneliness and the hell of society. And I believe that's the reason for his self-sabotage. He doesn't want to be successful because success means he actually has to interact with people, that he could be loved. And love means vulnerability. Vulnerability means risk, and risk means he could get hurt, so he'd rather stay in his safe, predictable misery. But there's an even darker layer. Let's talk about band geeks. In this episode, Squidward founds a marching band, and for the first time, we see him as a leader, as someone with authority. And you know what happens? He becomes a tyrant. He yells at people. He humiliates them. He breaks them down. Exactly the things he's experienced his whole life. That's the cycle of pain. Squidward was hurt, so he hurts others. He was criticized, so he criticizes others. He was rejected, so he rejects others. But here's the tragic part. At the end of the episode, when the band succeeds without him, Squidward isn't angry. He's empty. Because he realizes that he was the reason for the failure, not the other's talent, not the circumstances, himself. And this realization is so painful that he immediately represses it. The next day, he's the old Squidward again, bitter, cynical, blaming others. Because the alternative, taking responsibility for his own misery, is too painful. Now comes the most disturbing part. There's an episode almost nobody understands correctly, Squidville. In this episode, Squidward is mistakenly taken for an endangered species and brought to a protected colony of other squids. Finally, he's surrounded by his own kind, by cultured, educated, artistically gifted beings. This should be his paradise, right? Finally away from SpongeBob, finally understood. But what happens? He becomes even more unhappy because he realizes it was never about SpongeBob. It was never about his environment. It was always about him. The other squids are just as cultured as him, but they're happy. They enjoy their lives. They appreciate their art. And Squidward is still bitter. And for the first time in the series, Squidward has a moment of clarity. He understands that he's the problem, that he spent his whole life running away from himself. And what does he do? He runs back to Bikini Bottom, back to SpongeBob, back to his old life. Why? Because change means he'd have to face his real demons, and that's worse than anything else. Let me present you with a final theory that ties everything together. I believe Squidward wasn't always like this. I believe there was a moment in his past, a defining moment that broke him. In SB 129, we briefly see young Squidward. And you know what stands out? He's smiling. He looks hopeful. He has dreams. What happened between that Squidward and the Squidward we know? I believe he was destroyed by the art world. Maybe there was a moment where he poured his heart into a performance and failed completely. Maybe he was humiliated by someone he admired. Maybe he realized his talent would never be good enough. And that one moment broke him. Showed him that dreams are dangerous, that hope means pain, that it's safer to be cynical and have low expectations. So he put on a mask. The mask of the bitter critic, of the cynic, of the man who expects nothing and therefore can never be disappointed. But under that mask is still the young Squidward, the dreaming artist, the guy who just wanted to be loved and understood. And here's the heartbreaking truth. SpongeBob might be the only real friend Squidward ever had. Yes, SpongeBob annoys him. Yes, SpongeBob doesn't understand him, but SpongeBob never gives up. SpongeBob sees Squidward every day and still smiles. SpongeBob gets rejected and comes back the next day. And I believe somewhere deep inside Squidward, he appreciates that. Because SpongeBob does what nobody else does. He stays. In Help Wanted, there's a scene that makes me cry. Squidward is completely devastated, and SpongeBob does something simple. He just stays with him, silently, without judgment. And Squidward allows it. For a brief moment, he drops the mask. For a brief moment, he's vulnerable, and the world doesn't fall apart. But the next day, mask back on. Because hope is dangerous. Because vulnerability means pain. You came here for a fun cartoon analysis, but instead, you found a story about trauma, about self-sabotage, about a man who keeps himself in prison imprisoned because freedom is too terrifying. Squidward isn't the villain. He's the victim. His own victim. And that's the tragic brilliance of this character. He's the most realistic character in the whole show. Because we all have a little Squidward in us. We all know the fear of success, the safety of misery, the temptation to blame others for our unhappiness. But the show also gives us hope. Because despite everything, despite his bitterness and self-destruction, there are moments where Squidward shines through. The real Squidward, the artist, the dreamer, and maybe, just maybe, that's the real message. It's never too late. Even if you've sabotaged yourself for years, even if you've made yourself comfortable in your own hell, there's always a way out. You just have to be willing to drop the mask. And now that you've seen Squidward's true face, you'll never be able to see him as just the annoying neighbor again. But this isn't the only dark truth in Bikini Bottom. I have a theory about Mr. Krabs' true origin, and trust me, it's disturbing. See you on the next deep dive.